I feel like this is a very important story to talk about because this is one of my bigger complaints when it comes to the Trump administration. It was a little over a year ago when Jeff Sessions had gone out there and basically made the claim that he wanted to look in to making marijuana completely illegal at the federal level, like not letting the states individually mandate how they want to handle it, and really going against the thoughts and opinions and support of a wild majority of Americans. And he's since backed off of that. But now we're in this particular phase now where federal prosecutors are told to seek death penalty in drug cases. Now, there are times absolutely where I do think a death penalty is needed, but like 9 out of 10 times life in prison is better, and I'll tell you why. Just right off the bat, cost. The cost of life in prison far cheaper than putting someone on death row. The average cost of a death row inmate, I'm not kidding you. Last I checked, number could go down, could go up, I have no idea. But the last time I checked, which was a couple years ago, 12 million bucks is what it costs to have someone on death row. Average for a person on life, 40,000 a year. I mean, it takes a long time to get to 12 million when you can just have someone and incarcerate. Plus, they're not dying. If you believe in reincarnation, they don't get the reset button. You know, they're trapped for a long, long time. And isn't that better overall than just taking them back and snuffing them out? I mean, the idea seems easier, but it's not like you're picking up your dog shit. You know, it's like you gotta. I think there's moral implications here. Anyway. U.S. Attorney General Jeff Sessions instructed federal prosecutors on Wednesday to seek the death penalty in drug-related cases whenever it is appropriate, saying the Justice Department must boost efforts to counter America's epidemic of opioid abuse. Yes, fine. You want to handle the problem of opioid abuse? I'm totally on board with that. But where does a lot of the abuse come from? Perhaps we should look into pharmaceutical companies who very heavy-handedly push this stuff through doctors, and doctors are constantly getting in trouble for overprescribing their patients, creating that level of addiction that can then, in fact, become a gateway drug into something else. It's a Keebler elf-looking motherfucker. Seeking the death penalty, I understand the idea. I just want to make that abundantly clear in my criticism. I get the intent, but it's treating the damn symptom, not the damn disease. His mandate to prosecutors followed a plan announced by President Donald Trump earlier this week that called for executing opioid dealers and traffickers and for stiffer sentencing laws for opioid trafficking. Now, I'm not against like stricter punishments for trafficking and for dealers. I'm not. I have no problem with any of that. These people are the ones who push it. They push it real good. Okay, not really a laughing matter, but I had to do it. And the whole thing there is that, yes, we need to find a way to punish them. But death? That's not going to solve the problem. It's really not. Because when you kill one of them, someone else takes their place. Because they're only the middlemen. You're literally just taking out the middlemen. And people are always going to be hard up for cash. Especially in the areas where the opioid crisis is the worst. Which, and I'm being abundantly fair here, is in Trump supporter country. Right? This is where a lot of it's at. Lower income people like the South. There's a lot of problems there. And that's it's not something that's never really talked about. The greater call for use of the death penalty in federal drug cases has already sparked a backlash from criminal justice reform groups. They say it is the wrong response to a public health crisis and harks back to the 1980s era war on drug policies that led to racial disparities in prosecutions. And I do agree. I've always been one of the people to say, like, weed is really not that big of a deal. And I do feel like, based on what I've seen, there are an overwhelmingly disproportionate amount of black men in jail for pot. Let's be fair. No one should be in jail for pot unless you're like peddling it to like kids, right? I mean, if you're selling it to people who are of age, slap them on the wrist, take their shit, kick them out, fine them or whatever, and don't end their life over that. But it's weed is not that big of a deal. But the war on drugs is a failed one, and I think anyone with half a brain would agree with me on that. We spent countless funds to battle something that over time has only gotten worse, if it doesn't show you the inefficiency of that particular war, then I don't know what does. But going out there and basically trying to take a page from Duterte and giving all these fuckers helicopter rides is not going to be the end of the drug problem. It's just simply not. So anyway, while the death penalty is used in the United States, it is generally handed down in federal cases only in connection with the most heinous crimes. Yep. According to Death Penalty Information Center, 61 federal prisoners currently sit on death row, and they are really suckling at the taxpayer teat. And I mean, just like they're there, both hands, like they are just going nom, 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 because it costs so much freaking money. Okay, so apparently it's not the South, it's Dixieland where the opioid crisis is. It's everywhere, man, but it's predominantly on the East Coast. Okay, there's that. Drug traffic. Oh, it says, in the face of all this death, we cannot continue with business as usual, Sessions said of the opioid epidemic in a memo sent to the country's U.S. U.S. Attorney's offices. Drug traffickers, transnational criminal organizations, and violent street gangs all contribute substantially to the scourge. To combat this deadly epidemic, federal prosecutors must consider every lawful tool at their disposal. Yeah, and quite frankly, when it comes to people who are addicted or caught with it or caught with enough to be considered for distribution, perhaps maybe rehabilitation would be the better course of action rather than taking him out back, loading him up in a chopper, driving him up, flying up 1,000 feet and saying, see ya. Critics say that the greater use of the death penalty could tie up resources at U.S. attorneys' offices because death penalty cases are more complex and take longer to move through the court system because of the multiple appeals. If a judge sits there and hands down a death penalty sentence, like points at you and says, like, I hereby sentence you to death, there is an automatic appeal filed on your behalf. So now you go through the appeals process, and then you go through another appeal, and that takes time and years and years and years and years, and mounting legal costs and legal fees. There's a reason why it ultimately does not act as the deterrent that many people think that it is. It's not. It's really, really not. And I used to think that it was. I really did. But it's ultimately not. Not when you look at it from a resources perspective. Right? Just saying. The death penalty cases are extremely difficult and cumbersome and complicated, one former federal prosecutor told Reuters when Trump first announced the plan. They take a long time, lots of resources, and every U.S. attorney's office has a lot of limited resources. Under U.S. law, there's only four limited circumstances in which the death penalty can be sought in federal drug cases. Those include cases that involve racketeering, cases involving use of a firearm resulting in death during a drug trafficking crime, cases where murder is committed as part of the crime enterprise, and cases involving large quantities of drugs. Is this going to be every single one of those that come through? No. And if we start handing out death sentences willy-nilly, we're going back into like olden times. And I'm not talking like the 1955 era that people like Trump and the freaking baby boomers want. I'm talking like 1855, back there when they were lynching motherfuckers for like anything. Did you look at my horse the wrong way? Get the noose. You don't want that. You don't want that at all. We don't need to spend more money on this. We need to spend more money on education, rehabilitation, and treatment. Help people. This kind of scare tactic doesn't work. It just moves it underground. It moves it away. And if that's what they're going for, to make it appear like they've had an impact on a war, a needless war that's cost countless billions and countless lives. Because no, pretty much like every year you hear about a DEA officer getting killed, right? And it's usually by like booby traps set out in some, or there's like maybe a shootout with some drug dealers. There's booby traps that happen in some farmlands where they grow pot up in the hills and stuff. The hill people. It's ridiculous. Doesn't work that way. I'm sorry. I feel strongly about this. I do. I feel very strongly about this. This is not the right course of action. Brett Tolman, a former U.S. attorney for the District of Utah, who's now attorney with Ray, Quinley, and Nebecker, said Trump's proposal was unwarranted because the Justice Department already had started to seek out stiffer penalties in drug cases by requesting sentencing enhancements, a blunt legal tool that can add a large amount of prison time to a person's sentence. Like, that is a more appropriate approach rather than just like, killing them. Since they're already going in the direction that is so aggressive, he says, why does the president even want to mess with the death penalty? Because, and look, look, he likes Duterte. Duterte has been kind to Trump. Duterte throws people out of helicopters. He's led death squads to take out druggies. He's massacred people left and right. And Trump has effectively praised him for that. We've seen the transcripts from that. Oh, you're doing very well with your drug problem over there by mass murdering people. This is who our president responds to. This is who he looks up to. I would not be surprised if in the residence of the White House, right above his bed is a framed poster of Putin, Kim Jong-un, and Duterte. And then also President Xi written there in the corner going like, soon you'll be on the wall. He looks to people who exude the power of a dictator as being a person to look up to. And that probably has to do with the fact that these people are ultimately unchallenged on their own soil in any meaningful way. And if anyone gets any bit remarkably close to that, oh, hey, you want to go in this helicopter over here and check out the scenery? Because it's wonderful. It is just wonderful. The sunset is just beautiful. You should come see it. That's why he wants the harsher penalties. There's no other explanation for it. You don't cure a problem like this by, replacing the stick with a tire iron. But Jeff Sessions here wants to end the war on drugs. Jeff Sessions probably helped push that along. And Trump, with his love of these types of people, brought us to this point now where we could see death penalty sentencing get increased, which then means a further burden on taxpayers, and not one that pays for itself, because I'm sorry, Mexico ain't paying for these for these people on death row. There's no point. There's no point. But then again, we have an idiot as our commander-in-chief. What you just saw was a shorter clip from a longer show. The Rustled Podcast airs every Sunday through Thursday night at 9:30 p.m. Pacific Standard on rustled.net. Please consider subscribing to the channel as well as 3 Buck Theater and potentially becoming one of our sponsors at patreon.com/mundanematt. Thank you and have a great day.